right. So before we get started on the Midrash, we'll read this together and we'll pray. The scripture says, "You'll eat and be satisfied, and you will bless our God for good land He has given you." So let's do that. Abba, we have eaten and we're satisfied. We thank you for the land. It's in Yeshua's name. Amen. So fast. Okay. Here. So this is the Midrash on Torah portion Shalech Lekha. Here were the aliyot that we read, and here was the first verse with Hebrew and Hebrew transliterated, and this was the first verse from the Judaic Press Complete Tanakh. We saw that Shalech Lekha, the first two words, or Shalach dash Lekha, are the first words in Torah in verse 2 there. Send out for yourself. Be a translation of that. So now comes the question of how many mitzvot were in this particular portion. 3, 7, 1, or 6. Notice that they're not in complete order, it's in a random order. So who votes for A, 3? Okay. Who votes for B, 7?
Bingo.
Who votes for C, 1?
I'll go for C.
Who votes for D, 6? It's on my battleship.
At least it wasn't C4.
Yeah, it should be C4. That would have been a bit more. That would have been funnier. All right, so sorry for those who voted D6. That is out. For those that voted C1, sorry.
Oh, man.
So it is between 3 and
Can
7.
I change my vote?
Change your vote.
3. Hey.
What folks are saying 3A, and that is, in fact, correct. Good job.
That's what you were thinking.
I knew that. What are you thinking?
Oh, is that what you
How do you
did?
figure it? We just read it today.
So here are the mitzvot. They all come from chapter 15. To set aside a portion of the dough for the Kohen, to put tzitzit on the wings of your clothing, and to not follow after dictates of your own heart and eyes, to indulge in evil thoughts and sights. The text says to you not to prostitute yourselves. So as we were going through the fun challenge, one of the the question was, what does Shalech Lekha translate to? And send forth for you can be send forth for yourself. This is from the Art Scroll Humash, that says that the rabbinic understanding is that Yah is saying, according to your own understanding, I'm not commanding you, but if you wish, you may sin, because it's sinning for yourself to strengthen your walk, so to speak. So according to this view, then he is not actually commanding Israel to send a reconnaissance team to reconnoiter the land, but allowing it to happen because of their unbelief that Yah would in fact deliver them into the land safely and lead them in their conquest. It didn't turn out very well if that was the case, though, did it? Because the reconnaissance team failure resulted, or at least their bad report resulted in Israel spending 40 years in total in the desert, not just going in directly as they really were programmed to do. So they're often called spies, but it doesn't seem to me that they're really spies because they're leaders, right?
Recon team.
Yes, that's why I like how the Complete Jewish Bible, maybe others also translate this to reconnoiter the land. In the army, this would be called a leader's recon. You go forward to see for yourself what the land looked like before you, before you attack. So it's not really a spy mission because spies are typically lower level. They're not really recognized, not men of renown or not men of name. Spies are those that, if they're caught, they're often, not remembered, so to
Don't
speak.
exist anymore.
Well, they're disavowed. We didn't send them to do that. But these were men. They all went. They all came back. But as I said, it's not really a spy mission, but it's more of a leader's recon. One person, one leader per tribe. Caleb, of course, and Yehoshua were the leaders of Judah and Ephraim. So in terms of who they are, the leaders, Hoshea, of course, this is one of the questions from the leader, or the fun challenge was who represented Hoshea and who represented Ephraim? The answer was Yehoshua. Caleb, the son of a Kenizzite, represented Yehuda. Who represented Levi? Because there is one man per tribe, but who represented Levi? Right, it's kind of a trick question. There wasn't a Levite representative because they weren't going to own the territory of the land. There's going to be Levite land like around certain cities and such, but it's not the same as it's land within another tribe's area. They weren't landowners. They're basically go wherever the ark goes. Wherever the ark goes is where the Levites would go.
So their cities that they own would be in the different lands.
They'd be within other tribal lands, yeah. So the word that we see in the report of from the, if you will, the bad report, it goes good report, and then nevertheless, or the Hebrew word FS. So it's in verse 27. It's all good. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And then Ephes. Nevertheless is how the New American Standard translates that. Ephes. Ceasing or expressing non-existence. In other words, despite what was said about this great land with flowing milk and honey and lots of fruit, these grapes that we took, that doesn't make any difference. It doesn't mean anything because Ephes, the people who lived in it are strong and cities fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. So Ephes is a word that sounds to me a lot like, although this would be an acronym, it sounds to me like someone letting the air out of tires. It's like, we're all good. It's all good. The wheels are rolling. Ephes.
And all of a sudden you feel deflated.
Yeah, deflated. Yeah.
My version says accept.
Yeah, it's some sort of contradictory. In other words, that whatever went before doesn't matter because the people are too powerful. So the following.
But was that a non-truth, or where they were reporting the truth, weren't they? It's just they were putting doubt that they could handle it.
Yeah, I don't think that it was true. The question is, what is its meaning really of what's going on here. What the text says the sons of Anak were there in verse 22. And then later in 32 and 33, it says, this is land eating up all its inhabitants, and people whom we saw in it are men of great size. We saw there the Nephilim, sons of Anak, and of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in their eyes. So there's a bit of projection here in that you're projecting what they saw, even though you didn't actually get it from them. You can say for yourself, we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in their eyes, is a projection of what your truth is, so to speak. CC asked, does the word Ephes mean they were negating the promise of the land? I think in terms of promise, the land is full of promise, but there is a fear of that they were not powerful enough to take hold of that promise. And the fear was rooted in the idea that they're going to have to do it on their own strength and not with the help of Yah, who promised them to
So in essence,
lead
they
them
were telling God he was not even able to lead them into that land.
Yeah,
That he promised them.
Yeah, that's essentially that lack of faith is what's being said here. It didn't have faith that Yah could, in fact, carry out what he had said he would do. We see these folks again later. This is in Joshua chapter 15. It says, to Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, he gave a portion, and with the sons of Yehudah, as I ordered Yehoshua, namely Kiryat Arba. Arba was the father of Anak and called Hebron. Caleb expelled from there 3 descendants of Anak. Sheshai, and continuing on. So these really were the descendants of Anak. Question is, are these the Nephilim of chapter 6, verse 4, that says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and they bore up children to them. These were the ancient heroes, the men of renown. So this kind of digs into a controversial topic regarding the nature or the character of the Nephilim. The mention of Nephilim in our chapter 1336, this is from Jewish commentaries, is no reason to believe they survived the flood. The excited imagination expresses its terror at the men of great stature, saying that they must be the old antediluvian or pre-flood giants. That's from the Hertz Chumash, Pentateuch, and Haftorahs, which also quotes Josephus and Philo, and not quoting, it says references. It says Philo, Josephus, and the Book of Jubilees are misled by heathen fables who said these were those Nephilim. They say there is no trace in Genesis of fallen angels or rebellious angels. The idea of intermarriage of angels and human beings is altogether foreign to Hebrew thought. That is, again, a commentary from Rabbi Hertz in the Hertz Chumash.
Even though the Bible literally says that.
Well, we can start with an earlier book, which is Jewish, the Book of Enoch, right? So when we look at the Gilgamesh epic from the Babylonians, that is a distortion of the Book of Enoch, not the Book of Bereshit or Genesis. You may have heard that that Gilgamesh is a distortion of the flood account from the Bible, but it really is more of a distortion of the Book of Enoch. We know, according to what Jude said, Jude confirms that it was actual Enoch that wrote the Book of Enoch, and that the book of Enoch does in fact speak of angels who sinned with human women. Now, the book of Enoch is not in the accepted scriptures, but there are. It is definitely a Jewish book. So the comment that is foreign to Jewish thought is not accurate. So you look at, there are several theories about who the Nephilim were and the sons of Elohim. It says, here's the first one, is that they were the descendants of fallen angels who lusted after and had intercourse with human women. Second one here is that the sons of Elohim are the male descendants of Seth, and that the text talking about the daughters of men are the female descendants of Cain. And so it's saying that Genesis 6 condemned intermarriage between believers, the sons of Seth, and unbelievers, the daughters of Cain. And the third thought of who are the sons of Elohim means that the literal meaning of Elohim is mighty one. So Elohim, mighty ones, plural. And so what it's indicating is that sons of Elohim in this context means the sons of mighty rulers, princes, nobles, judges, who are taking wives of the population in general, quote unquote, whomever they chose. So there is there's an example of the powerful abusing the powerless. Those are the three different main theories about Nephilim. Now, you can look at the word itself, and that might give us a clue here. So there is a variant spelling in one of the two appearances of Nephilim in chapter 13, verse 33 of the Midbar. There is an extra yud, or you could say that it's defective twice and correct once. The one exception is the extra yud in one of the instances, the first one where it says, there we also saw the Nephilim, and then the sons of Enoch are part of the Nephilim. So the additional yud in the first one of Numbers 13:33 could indicate the word used here is originally Aramaic in origin, because the Aramaic word naphil means giant. Of course, Nephilim in Hebrew would be fallen ones. Naphal is to fall, but in Aramaic, naphil is giant. And you can sort of see that, like in Aramaic, like for example, Jastro's dictionary lexicon. So this is a slide you may have seen before. I have used it before, talking about Naphil and Orion. The name Orion is a mighty hunter and a giant in Greek mythology, killed by Diana or Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. The word Orion is derived from an Akkadian word meaning saying Aru Ana, which means light of heaven. So over time, Aru Ana became a very common word that you recognize, which is what? What did Aru Ana become?
Ryan.
Yeah. Any others? Any other related words, perhaps? If you guessed Aryan, you'd be right. Aryan is the name that the ancient Persians called themselves. So Aryan, you might recognize a derivative, Iran. It's that same word. So in Aramaic, Orion is known as Naphil. The plural is Nephilim. You see it's a little bit different than the Hebrew. Nephilim can become Nephilim if you normalize that, from Hebrew or Aramaic into Hebrew. And so the first definition for Nephil is giant, again from Jastro's dictionary. So perhaps this means that those that they encountered in terms of Nephilim were in fact ancient and fierce people called the Persians. A people great and tall, the sons of Anakim, who you know and of whom you have heard, who can stand before the sons of Anak. Now, to add a little bit of credibility to that, there is a tradition in Armenia that a Persian noble named Anak assassinated the king of Armenia, leading to the conquest of Armenia. Anak is a close relative or sometimes the brother of the Armenian king in this story. So there is potentially a difficulty or a drawback with that. And here's some, if you will, not really attacks, but potential arguments against that. The first is that angels becoming sexually active may be a difficulty with that can be found in Matthew 22, which reads, "For in the resurrection neither men nor women will marry, not rather they will be like angels in heaven." And so if that's the case, what did Paul mean by, therefore the women ought to have a symbol of authority or head covering on her head because of the angels? What would be the meaning of that? Well, I know that we've discussed this before, and there's a phrase in the Matthew text that makes it, this maybe overlooked in this argument, is that angels in heaven, the fallen angels, if they are fallen angels, are no longer in heaven. They've been kicked out. So the what Paul is talking about is the angels. I think angels, potentially the fallen angels, may be lusting after, and what is similar to what Enoch has, lusting after human women here. The difficulty with Nephilim surviving the flood, of course, we know that only 8 people survived the flood, and there's no Nephilim named among those. Eshkol, of course, the symbol of the Israeli tourist industry. You can sort of see a stylized in that sign for Misrad HaTarat is the over the word Misrad. It's 2 of the reconnaissance team carrying back their cluster, the Eshkol grapes. In the next chapter, first of all, anything you'd like to add to or discuss, we've talked about in this particular chapter. I have a little bit in chapter 14, but a little bit in 15. Yes, go ahead.
The sons of Anak, wouldn't that be the Anakim, there's a current thing that's going around talking about the ancient peoples, my brain's not working really well, so I'm trying to remember the term. Like Anakim or not, and they apparently have been a problem for for a very long time.
Well, if these descendants of Anak were in fact Persians, you can see that the Persians have had designs on the land for a long time. They've pushed this far, and they're still doing things, or they're still shooting missiles at it today, or recently, missiles and drones. If they're related to, because that Persians are not Arabs. I mean, they don't even speak the same language. As Farsi is their language, not Arabic. So there is a difference. Farsi is of course the derivative of Parsi, which is Persian. So they speak a different language. So these 10 times, the test here says None of the people who saw my glory and the signs I did in Egypt and in the desert, when you tested me these 10 times, did not listen to my voice, which by this command, they'll bring 6:16, it says, do not put Adonai your God to the test as you tested him at Massah. Testing. So the question might be, to which incidents does these 10 times refer? Well, we have an answer given to us by the rabbis in Talmud Bavli that addresses these 10 times. And you can find them, it's all derived from the text of the Torah. It starts with this: 10 trials that our ancestors imposed upon the Holy One, blessed be He, 2 at the shore of the sea, 2 in the water, 2 in regard to the manna, 2 in regard to the quail, and 1 in regard to the golden calf, 1 in the wilderness of Haran. 2 at the sea, 1 in going down and 1 in coming up. In going down, because there are no graves in Egypt, you have taken us away to die in the wilderness. In coming up, they were rebellious at the sea, even at Yam Suf. Nonetheless, he saved them for his name's sake. You can see that derived from Psalm 106. 2 in the water, Mara and Rephidim. Mara, and they came to Mara and could not drink the water, is written, and people complained against Moses. Rephidim, they encamped at Rephidim, and there is no water to drink, is written, and people struggled against Moses. That's from Shemot 17:2. So continue on. 2 in regard to the manna. Do not go out. They went out. Do not leave any over, but they left some over. Even in this passage, or in our Torah portion, it's not really about manna per se, but it was about observing Shabbat and not going out together sticks to build a fire on Shabbat. The next one is to regard to the quail. Regard to the first quail, the second quail. In regard to the first, when we sat by the flesh pots from Shemot 16, and in regard to the second, a mixed multitude, the Erev Rav, that was among them from regard to 11:4, Numbers 11:4. 1 in regard to the golden calf, the wilderness of Haran. So we get to our 10. So what if in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1, it says the things in the desert happened as a prefigurative historical event for us for today, that we learn today. This is from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So what if the test of wilderness were for us from in the times to come in the Achrit Hayamim, or the latter days? So here are perhaps some tests. And I think I have a strange typo in here, is the wrong color in the letter for some reason. But Exodus 14:10-14, do you believe Adonai can save you? This is just strange. That's the first test. Test number 2. Do you believe Adonai will give you water for life? Test number 3. Do you believe Adonai will give you food to eat? Test number 4. Do you believe Adonai will truly be present with you in the Achrit Hayamim? Test number 5. Do you believe Adonai is the one true Elohim who will save you? Test number 6. Will you reject or will you accept the bread he provides for you? Test number 7. Will you reject or accept Adonai's presence? Test number 8. Will you reject Adonai's salvation, his Yeshua? Test number 9. Will you reject Adonai's Mashiach, his anointed? And the last test, will you accept or reject the promised kingdom? Of course, this is only my supposition of what the 10 tests could be, but perhaps an example of what the kinds of tests that we'll have to pass in the future. Moving to chapter 15, one of the one law passages, one chukah passages. There's one chukah for you of the assembly, the kahal, and for the stranger and the ger. So there's one chukah for the kahal and for the ger who sojourns with you, a chukah forever throughout your generations. As you are, so is the stranger before Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. One Torah and one right ruling, one mishpat, is for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. So looking at Ephesians chapter 2, which says we're no longer, those who are come to faith in Messiah come from far off or drawn near, and they're considered to be no longer gerim, or no longer strangers, according to Ephesians chapter 2. So if there's only one Torah for the native born and for the ger, how much more is there one Torah when we are no longer strangers? So what are some of those words there? Mishpat, chucha, chuchim. So quick review, a couple of definitions there. Torah, wrote, is instructions, principles, root word for light and for straight, comes from that word. Mishpat, mishpatim, judgments, deliverances. Looking at for mitzvot with obvious reasons are called mishpatim. And chuchim are imprints or images, marks produced by pressure, as in Yah's imprint on us. So mitzvot without apparent reason given for doing so. In other words, things like the dietary instructions concerning what is food for you, what is food and what is not. One Torah would be within this category of no apparent reason given, just Yah said so. So really, the final area I have discussion is on tzitziot. And we answered that the word there, highlighted in blue, techelet, is the Hebrew word there. And what we're talking about here is a wings or flowers. In fact, it's kind of the same word for this. The root word for zitz. On the tzitzit is a wings or corners of garments. It's on the wing or thread, or the cord is made. One is of techelet. So when it says that one tzit is on the wings, it's singular is on the wings plural of their garments. So it essentially means that there's one tzit on each wing of the four-cornered garment. And on each of these flower formations, so to speak, a tied formation is made of techelet. There's a parallel passage about tzitziot, and it comes from Devarim 22, and it talks about wearing them on arba kanthot, or the four wings or four corners. The word used is not beged, is the word for clothing, as it is in our Torah portion, but it is the word kasut, which means covering. A kasut can simply mean covering, as it does in chapter 21, verse 10 of the book of Shemot or Exodus. Example of kasut used here is in Isaiah, which says, if he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food or clothing and her onatah, her conjugal rights. That's from Exodus 21. It's in parallel with the word for clothing in Job as well as in Isaiah. Here is an interesting commentary from a Karaite perspective. Unfortunately, the print is a bit small on this. I apologize for that. It says, the way the tzitzit are bound is not specified in the Torah, and is therefore a matter of custom and personal preference how one binds their tzitzit, or how one ties it. No one way is sanctioned by halakha, but the definition of the word tzitzit and gedolim might bear significance on this matter. Gedolim is kind of this chain work. Now we have ascertained that the techelet, fabrics and materials mentioned in the Torah, were dyed techelet by indigo. Deep blue indigo blue may be thus taken to be the exact shade of the color techelet in question. Well, part of that is not generally accepted, in that the tzitzits were dyed by indigo, or dyed with indigo. But it would be, what the rabbis are saying, be the same color as indigo, but not indigo. In my opinion, is a good argument then could be made for a different plant of the same family called woad. As the Mishnah says, a priest whose hands are discolored with woad should not lift up his hands to say the Aharonic blessing, because this makes the congregation look at him. In other words, looking at him because he has blue dyed hands, and he's leading the blessing. So the woad, as you may know, is a plant that was once grown from Egypt all the way to England. It, in fact, woad was also used as a paint. That's what the Picts used. You may have seen that in movies, painting your face with blue. That was from woad, not a dye, but as a paint. Woad and madder root were used to dye spools of thread in Shimon Bar Kokhba's army. Whether that bluish thread was used for tzitzit is not certain. It wasn't indigo in the time of the Exodus, because indigo wasn't imported into Egypt until much later than the Exodus. We know that indigo was not the plant, but it might have had the same coloring. Oral tradition says the real techelet is exactly the same color as indigo, but is not indigo. Indigotin is what makes the blue of woad. It's also the same thing as in indigo, as you might guess, indigotin, as well. The same substance is in the major competitors to plant-based dyes, which was cuttlefish, which is kind of like a squid, and murex snails. Woad gives a natural dye similar to indigo, and you can get a deep blue dye from it. You can. My experience with dyeing woad is that depending on how long you leave it in the vat, and if you leave it to dry in the shade or the sun, gives it different colorings. So it seems to me, anyway, that woad is a viable source, or viable potential source for that. We're not really, in terms of the understanding of rabbis, the techelet is not the color; it's the source of the color. And it seems, though, that blue, if it has the right color, it should be, I think, reasonable to use. here's some examples of different ways to tie tzitzit.
So Orthodox don't have the blue, just the white because of the unsurety.
Yes, although some Orthodox are wearing
Blue.
blue Tefillah. Yeah, from one of the two sources, either dyed from cuttlefish or from the Murex snail. There's two different kind of schools that are selling it in. I'm saying schools and brides. It's not as
Is
a
that a
class.
recent thing?
It's,
I've never gotten.
it's
When I saw Orthodox, it was all white.
typically it is still all white, but you do see occasionally, because the ones who are dyeing it, Rod Zinn is one of the makers, is Orthodox community. So it is, this one that says Rod Zinn Chabad. Rod Zinn is the dye of that. I think Rod Zinn is the cuttlefish. This type according to Chabad standards in this one. So it's you can order tzitzit from Jewish sellers of talits and tzitzitans that is tied in a certain way and dyed with whichever source you want it to be. And certainly it's extra to have it. The dyed version you can have it dyed.
You think it's a matter of not being obedient to not have a blue?
Well, this slide discusses it. It says, at some point in history, the source of the dye was lost, and since then, traditional Jews have worn plain white tzitzit without any dyes. In the last 2 centuries, the number of attempts have been made to identify the ancient source of the dye, including are using relevant Talmudic sources. Generally speaking, the vast majority of Orthodox Jews continue to wear only white tzitzit without any dye. Better to use no dye at all than to rely on uncertain scientific finds. Again,
it is because of the unknown.
Uncertain, and again, based on the idea that Tefillah is not the color but the source. And so if you're using a different source than that, you're not in that. If it's
Even
not,
if it's still blue,
it's
it would
not
be wrong.
right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. In other words, if that's what it means, if Tefillah can only be some referring to the dyeing source, then any color is going to be close but fake, so to speak. So that's why typically white is the vast majority still to this day. Although I have seen, as I said, a number of Orthodox are wearing either Radzin or B'nai Barak is the other one.
I heard somewhere that that the tzitzits could actually be referring to a fringe or a tassel, as opposed to the long ties that you were showing.
Well, it's truly translated as tassel. If you go, the chain work idea is from that. If you look at the Karaite version, at the end of it, you can see it as like a bloom of a flower at the end of that. But it's a gedolim is the idea of it being a chain work. And that's the other text, or the other way. So there's also it's not the print is not that great. It says in the bottom there's a micro talit. I'm not sure. I don't remember who exactly was selling those. I think it Michael Root. Yeah. All right. That's pretty much all I have, except for a final comment rather.
Do you have a question? Were you wanting to ask a question?
I don't understand why you said that the Orthodox are dressed in white.
No, they're
White
They're
seats.
white
tzitzit.
seats
Oh, okay.
without the thread of blue.
So, sort of a meme here. Make no mistake, the same people who are demanding you accept and tolerate their way of life passionately hate you for yours and are relentlessly seeking to destroy it.
Yeah, sounds all right.
So, what are your questions or comments?
I've got one. Actually, it harkens back to chapter 13.
Okay.
The giants,
Mhm.
the Nephilim and all that.
Yeah.
Been thinking that there's actually a possibility that they could have gotten through the flood if one of their ancestors was one of the daughters of the daughter-in-laws of Noah.
Yeah, Brett and I were discussing that yesterday.
Well, it seems that if that's the case, the whole point of the flood was not carried out.
Except the point of the flood wasn't necessarily, was partially to wipe them out, but also to cleanse the land. And when I read it, there did seem to be a separation between the ones that were called Nephilim and the ones that were called the sons of Elohim.
But wouldn't that be still a corruption? Where it says, the earth was corrupt before God, the earth was filled with violence. God saw the earth and said, yes, God saw the earth and yes, it was corrupt, for all living beings had corrupted their ways on earth.
Well, it sounded like their ways were corrupt, not necessarily the individuals.
Isn't that what corrupts an individual, is their ways?
Yeah, but I mean, not necessarily physically corrupt, but as in completely immoral and completely ignoring what God said to do or not do. Because it doesn't say where the daughters-in-law came from. It just says, and their wives, didn't even say who they were.
Well, again, you'd be arguing from absence of saying about that, so it'd be hard to really comment on that, I guess. It seems to me that in general it would go against the whole point of the flood was to purify the earth from corruption. If you have a
And they were physically corrupted by the.
Yeah, but then how would they have giants in David time?
well,
It
the
sounds like there were giants even further back.
giants.
Yeah.
Giantism. I mean, the people can be giants from, if you will, corruption later on of that, of their height or whatever. It seems like from what we read in the text of Noah is that everyone who walked on the earth was killed except for the 8 inside the boat.
Yeah, somewhere in scripture later it says 8 souls that were saved.
Yeah, it's in one of Peter's.
Yeah.
It's the first, second Peter. All right. Well, it's good for.
And it doesn't really say anything about the women, other than they were wives. The only one we know is the only one we don't know the name of is Noah's wife. That was Joan. Joan of Arc.
I have to bring a dad joke in.
Of course.
And that's why she was burned at the stake. All right. Well, let's pray. Well, thank you for allowing us to midrash on your word. Thank you for your wisdom and insight you gave us. We continue to seek out your face and to walk in your ways. It's in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Don't see anybody jumping up and go home real quick.